All right, we got some new information that's been going around for Sony with their PlayStation handheld, mostly the revival of it. And look, going back to the Vita, didn't go well for them necessarily, but things have changed in, what's been more than a decade? Decade and a half, really, since they kind of left that thing behind. But now, with a lot of these handhelds becoming as capable, even, especially when it comes to which games they can run compared to their console counterparts, seems like Sony is about to jump back in. But they also have technically another handheld that they may be refreshing here in 2026. So a lot to go over here today. If you guys enjoyed the video, hit the like button and subscribe if you're new. So I'm like fascinated to see how Sony re-enters the handheld markets. That's one of the reasons I've been following along as we get information around. I don't even know what they're going to call it. I mean, the thing that probably makes the most sense is the PlayStation 6 Portable. I'd like to think they maybe get a little creative with it at least. But either way, some new information could even be pointing towards when we could see the thing get announced and released. And I think now kind of indicates where it's going to be placed in the Sony hierarchy with their systems. All right, so let's take a look. This is over on Tech Power Up, and they're citing NeoGAF Forum with Kepler, who has been pretty up to date on information around different chipsets that are in development. Here, they are talking about not only the PlayStation 6 Portable, but also the PlayStation Portal, the streaming device. As it does appear, at least right now, the word is that Sony will indeed be refreshing that handheld. And it's funny because that was part of my predictions for 2026 is that there would be a new PlayStation Portal. And to me, I looked at how Sony originally approached the device. The reception that's been seems to be better than Sony was expecting from the market, and the attach rate being higher maybe than they were thinking, and them thinking, of course, as any company would, how can we sell this for more? How can we sell more of these? Especially right now in a world where prices are going up for just about everything. How do we make this thing maybe $300? Well, in this case, it's being said that there could be an OLED display that could go in. And you slap OLED on anything and it immediately feels more premium and can be marketed as a higher price system. And people tend to go, okay, well, that makes sense. So an OLED display, and it's also maybe being rumored that it could be higher refresh rate. I I don't I mean, 60 seems fine for a streaming device. If it's being played natively, I like the idea of a higher refresh rate as different games that are used, say, on the Switch too, that can actually take advantage of that higher refresh rate, not only just to hit it, say, 120 hertz, but actually just say do 40 and it look pretty smooth, all things considered with VRR. So I don't know if they're going to go that far with this new PlayStation Portal with the OLED screen, but the OLED, and I would like to see them go up to in terms of Wi-Fi. It's on Wi-Fi 5, going up to at least Wi-Fi 6E, but being able to use that additional wireless band, I think would be pretty good for the Portal because it just at this time it just exists on 5 gigahertz for most people, and that has become more and more congested over the years to where that 6 gigahertz band is just sitting there begging to be used by the Portal. So them going up to Wi-Fi 6E, I guess an OLED display, and maybe them pushing the price to, it's Sony. We see how expensive things get. Maybe they try to do it at $299 and they call it the PlayStation Portal Pro. Maybe. So that's I am interested though because I've been using my Portal to actually play Legend of Dragoon, which is an interesting choice, but I think it works pretty well for even a lot of the classic PlayStation Plus games that they put on the service. Although Legend of Dragoon has the timing around some of the attacks, and I've noticed it definitely feels a bit different on the Portal versus when I play it on the PS5 natively. Still, though, I've been able to go through it without too much issue. All right, so with the Portal, though, there's also, of course, the idea of a native experience that people are asking for with the PlayStation 6 Portable. And I'm calling it that now because to me, it sounds like Sony would be looking to release the thing right next to the PlayStation 6. As in they have their dedicated console, and then they do have their hybrid device. Yeah, it seems that this would be something that would be capable of being docked as well as being completely portable. Yeah, very similar to the Switch 2 right now. We have Kepler who talks about the PlayStation Portal refresh with the OLED display. And then there's PlayStation 6 Portable, where they go over RDNA 5 being used and as tech power up notes here, as that's opposed to the RDNA 4 from the current RX 9000 GPUs, and RDNA 3.5 that's found in the Strix Halo and other iGPUs. And as we're seeing right now with the Xbox ROG Ally X, similar in the sense that they're claiming 16 CUs. That'd be the same then as the Xbox Ally X. But RDNA 5 versus 3.5, it seems like a pretty substantial jump considering RDNA 5 is still just kind of, I mean, it's happening, but we really don't know enough about it. Like AMD hasn't done a big rollout and big reveal for it yet. It's still kind of just floating out there in the in the ether currently. So when you think about it that way, and the fact that we think RDNA 5 is going to be showing up sometime mid 2027, that would place this handheld coming out alongside, I think, the PS6 holiday 2027 at the earliest. Now, Sony does have access to a lot of the newer tech from AMD, and at times will even work to put that into their system before AMD puts it out in graphics card format, as we saw with Polaris and the PlayStation 4 Pro. But still, this handheld is quite interesting the more and more I hear about it, because we have had all kinds of information around different specs get out there. Like Moore's Law is Dead had an entire video where he talked about the four Zen 6C cores, then two low powered cores, mostly for like when it's asleep or doing downloads in the background stuff. And then there it is once again, the 16 RDNA 5 CUs. And actually, I'd say in terms of memory bandwidth, it's pretty good. It's not quite to where the PS5 is, but for a handheld device, everything that's kind of being thrown around right now is making this sound like it would not only just be a capable device, it would actually be one of the more powerful ones we've seen at all. And it's all going to come down to, I think, how efficient RDNA 5 ends up being in handheld form, because that's also going to dictate things like of course, the battery life, but also the clock speed that they end up having here, because that is the last big puzzle piece outside of just the entire rundown of RDNA 5 that AMD will eventually get up on stage and do. But how far they can push the chip when it comes to thermals and, again, battery consumption, because that is absolutely something that has to be taken into account, as we have seen with Nintendo in the Switch 2, where they will clock down the CPU so they do end up pulling significantly less power than even people were expecting. But because it's a closed system or closed box, you're able to see the Switch 2 at lower power draw do actually some very impressive things with something like Cyberpunk. But since it is rumored right now to be a hybrid device, when it's plugged in, you remove the limits of things like battery consumption, and maybe you could clock it up further and get near PlayStation 5 performance. That's what's so interesting about this is I think Sony would approach this as, here's a PlayStation 6 console that is just going to be more powerful. That's the thing. When Sony doesn't have to worry about confining their hardware in a smaller handheld device compared to, let's face it, if Sony needs a tank of a system, they will make a tank of a system like the PlayStation 5 to accommodate the thermals and everything else they have set up inside of that console. They will, for the sake of power. Yes, they'll dress it up and make it look weird, but they have no problem making a massive system, really. So in that case, you will have a PlayStation 6 that is going to be the high-end premium box, but then also this hybrid system next to it, maybe taking the place of the PlayStation 5 digital system when that came out, alongside the PS5 disc-based system. So that's kind of what I'm thinking. Maybe they both just release side by side, and Sony's like, hey, you can pick whichever one you want. Do you want the hybrid experience where you can have it on the go? Great. Do you want the system that might be doing, who knows, AI upscaling to 8K and 120 frames and stuff? We have that as well. Now, I do think you will have machine learning and upscaling for the handheld, but also probably still not on the level that you'll see with the just the console, the box. And I do think the handheld will be playing a PlayStation 5 and PlayStation 4 games through backwards compatibility, and then also tap into the PlayStation 6 library. We've already seen Sony kind of working on this quietly behind the scenes with the power saving mode. That, I mean, come on. Is anyone looking at that going, "Oh, finally, my PS5 won't draw as much power"? Sure, I have to cut the frame rate in half or lower the resolution. I don't think anyone, though, bought the PlayStation 5, let's face it, to save power from the wall. You bought the PS5 so you can play your games at 60 FPS or 4K if you're coming off the PS4. So that's just it's so funny the way they push that. It's like, come on, so we know what's going on here. You're testing these games for a lower power profile because yeah, you're working on a handheld internally. I think this is a very, very intriguing time for Sony heading into next generation, despite, I know, a lot of pushback around Sony going to the PlayStation 6. This handheld is something that I'm actually more interested in the handheld than I am in the PS6, only because I want to see what Sony comes up with, especially when it comes down to the spec, sure, but also the design of the system, because Sony is, I think, pretty good at making handhelds look good and actually be somewhat manageable in terms of the size. And let's face it, right now, man, these handhelds are they're pretty large. So I don't necessarily think Sony's going to be able to all of a sudden buck the trend and make a Vita size system with some of these specifications that are getting thrown around. But I would like to see what kind of interesting design they have in mind to show us that maybe looks a bit more sleek, a bit more premium, and maybe a bit weird even. Again, coming from Sony with some of their design philosophies. But let me know what you guys think about this one down below. I didn't mention anything about price yet because let's face it, this thing most likely 2027 holiday at the latest, or at the earliest, I should say. Could be 2028, I think at the latest now. But price will fluctuate by then. We could be talking about $800 systems just by default, like is the floor. Who knows where the world is going currently. But hey, if you want to give me your best guess around pricing, let me know down in the comments. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.